All right, all right. Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to Perspectives with Black Men. Today is part 7, legal aspects, and we will be focusing on things within the legal system as well as how we make progress and change by considering legal aspects of progress and change. So I'm really excited to have you here again. This is part 7 of a 10-part series on focus on race and racism and change and solutions and thinking about how do we innovate and progress our country so that all of us can have some level of equity in our experiences in this country. So I'm really excited to have 5 of my friends who are all in the legal field with various years of experience that we are going to give them opportunity to share their perspectives with you. As you know, this is all about giving people voice, giving Black men voice, and sharing with you our experiences and our solutions. That's our tagline. That's what we do with this series. And so with that being said, I want to first introduce to you my fraternity brother, and friend, and a person I've worked for many years, a decade probably or more, on our education committee here in Akron for our fraternity. We'll have Darrin Toney, who has been practicing law for 25 years. We want to welcome him here, and he serves as a general counsel and chief HR officer. And so if you could turn your camera on and introduce yourself, my brother.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for having me. Again, I'm Darrin Toney, and like Brother Akbar said, I'm in-house counsel and director of human resources in my current capacity, but I've practiced law for 25 years, so thank you for having me here.
Yes, thank you very much. We're so glad to have you here with us. We definitely are. Next, we're going to introduce Chris Bruce. Christopher is also an attorney working for the last 8 years. He currently works at ACLU. So I want to bring him on if he can join us, turn his camera on and introduce himself. I've been knowing him for probably 12 years now, maybe. And he's a really good friend of mine, and we have had many heated discussions and debates about this topic. So I'm really excited to have him share his perspective. So Chris, you can join us.
Heated discussions. I just called it just good banter. So everyone, thank you. Happy to be here. Chris Bruce, political director at ACLU of Georgia. I also teach at Georgia State University, a senior seminar on civil rights and civil liberties. I'm also a lobbyist down at State Capitol. And really what I'm most proud of is being a local Black man. That's what it really comes down to.
Yes, thank you. And he's been doing a lot of work recently with the protests and helping people get out of jail who have been arrested just for simply peacefully protesting. So I just want to thank you, brother. I have been watching you. I have been loving all of your posts and support you, as you probably already know, as you have been deep in the struggle and using your degree and your experience to help people during this time of progress.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Good love, all love, Black love.
Yes, brother. So next we have Cornelius Porter III. He has had his degree for 4 years. He and I served in the military together. And so I'm really excited to see everything that he's done since the 156. So if we can have Cornelius join us via camera here, and introduce himself. He's currently in entertainment business, so we're really excited to hear from him and his perspective. Cornelius, you have to turn your camera on and unmute yourself. Okay, so we're gonna come back to Cornelius because apparently there's some issue there. Next, we're gonna introduce one of my best friends who has been practicing for the last. Hello, I'm sorry. Okay, let's go back to Cornelius.
I apologize. Like my screen went to something else, and I couldn't get it back to the meeting, so I finally figured it out.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize for that. But yeah, right now I currently work in the film industry. I'm in the process of producing a couple of feature films and a TV series. But yeah, I still lend my voice to the calls. I always have people that reach out to me asking me information because I do try to stay abreast of what's going on. And yeah, I want to attack things using the creative side because I believe that the arts do have an influence on culture. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We actually had some liberating, what I call liberating lyricists on, and I think it was part 5. So I definitely agree with you on that one. Next, we will have Alexander Simpson. He, again, is one of my best friends. I've known him since the freshman year of college, and we lived, I think, 2 doors down from each other freshman year, and have been pretty good friends ever since. And so I really appreciate him joining us today, lending his perspective as well, and the work he does as a Board of Regent member at our alma mater. So we're definitely appreciative of the work he's given back to our alma mater there as well. He's been practicing for 9 years. And so I want to give him a chance to turn his camera on and introduce himself. Say anything you want. And I just thought about it. No one told us where they went to law school or where they got their education. So when we come back, I want everybody to do that. So if you could do that, Alex, when you come on, that'd be very good.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. NJ did forget to mention that I'm a brother of the greatest fraternity in the world, Kappa Alpha Psi.
That's very not true.
Just want to make sure I state that. But pleasure to meet everyone in this panel today. As NJ said, I'm an attorney here in Detroit. I'm in-house counsel as well, practicing at Microsoft, doing commercial transactions here in the U.S. and Canada. Bar Association, past president, and currently very active in the organization here of minority attorneys that is really looking to increase minority representation in the legal profession, which I think is vital and key to some of the changes that we need to have in society. As far as school, as NJ mentioned, we went to undergrad together at EMU at Eastern Michigan University. Also went to University of Michigan, got an MSW, went to law school at Indiana University, and I got an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. So I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's thoughts today. Thank
you. Thank you, Alex, for joining. Last but not least, we have one of my good friends who likes to get on me sometimes. But I'm really proud of this brother for representing us right here in Summit County, where I live in Akron, Ohio. Judge David Hamilton, who just recently in November was elected the first African-American male to the bench in Summit County in over 25 years. And so we're really proud of him and the work that he's doing in the municipal court. But he took office December 2019. And so he's been practicing law for the last 6 years and worked actually for the city of Akron for a point. So Judge Hamilton, if you want to join us.
Okay.
Thank you
Can
very
you
much.
guys hear me?
Yes,
All
we
right.
can.
All right. Good evening. Thanks for having me. I am Judge David Hamilton. As NJ said, I am the judge in Akron Municipal Court. I went to undergrad at the University of Akron and then went to law school at Thomas Cooley Law School in Lansing, Michigan, not too far from Detroit. And I've been practicing again. Well, actually, I told NJ wrong. So by the time I was elected judge, it was 7 years I had been practicing law. And I took the bench in December. And so I've been doing that since December, and I've been loving it ever since. So glad to be here and glad to be a part of this discussion with all of you today.
All right, so thank you everyone for joining us out there. Please type in your questions if you have them. We do prepare a few questions for our panelists, and then we go right to your questions. And so anything that you have to say, we will ask them to our panelists. So thank you again for that. I want to start off by asking a question. But before you ask this question, if you did not tell us about your education, please do that before you answer the question. So the first question I'm going to ask is, just as when you think about your experience as a judge or as a lawyer, can you talk to us about, a time when you felt like you might have been treated differently or you might have faced racism? I think that might be a good question. We're going to start with Darrin. And you're going to have to unmute yourself, Darrin.
Thank you. Wow, that's actually a loaded question in terms of experiencing racism in the profession. And I guess you wanted us to discuss or tell folks about our educational background first. And so I would just say I was born and raised in Mississippi. I attended Delta State University. That's where I got my undergraduate degree in business administration. I went to the University of Akron for law school, and I graduated from the University of Akron in 1995. So that's my educational background. In terms of experiencing discrimination, I guess in my profession, and I think you're probably talking about in life as well. I don't know if I can think of a time when I didn't experience discrimination. I can remember early on in grade school experiencing it from someone telling me that I'm not smart enough, can't do this, can't do that. I know I did pretty well in school, right? I was in honors classes, top 5 in the class, right? I remember being in honors physics in 12th grade, and my professor, and there were 5 of us in the class, and I was doing just as well as anybody else. The professor, we were at the end of the course, end of the year, about to graduate. The professor says to us, goes around the room, and asked us what we wanted to do. And I was the only black man in the class, only black person in the class. Well, the white students said doctor, lawyer, all of this stuff, right? Got to me. I said I wanted to be an engineer. And he looked at me and said, I don't know if you should do that because, and I asked, well, why not? And he said, well, I don't think you're cut out for it. Maybe you should go to a junior college and get an associate's degree and try to, make your profession that way. So, and that sort of blew my mind because I was just as competitive as anybody else. In terms of the legal profession, pretty much every time I stepped in a courtroom or in an office, someone's office to negotiate, I have to prove myself. And it's not, I don't think it's just a feeling that I have. You see the looks on people's faces. You know the kinds of questions that they're asking and what's underlying the question. So it's like it's always there, sometimes more prolific than others, but I've run into it so many times I can't really point to one particular instance. I mean, you're always battling. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but there have been numerous instances, and it's still to this day. So that's my response.
Yes, Chris, then Cornelius, Alex, and then Judge Hamilton.
All right, thank you for the question. Again, Chris Bruce. I went to the University of Georgia, go Dogs, uh, best school in the South, and for law school. But going back to my instance, I'll tell you about where it was the story that I tell all the other kids and the young black men that I mentor. At Georgia State University, I really got under my bearings for things. I was never the best scholar in high school. I barely graduated high school, but I did get to college. And once I get into college, I got a 4.0 off back because I said I'm not going to do that again. And continuously made it to the point where I was going to graduate cum laude from the honors program. And I've always had a knack for political science, always been good at it. And one of the few people I graduated with that still use my degree to this day as a political director. But I specifically remember one of my political science majors, political science professors, who I had asked to do my letter of recommendation to law school. And I was his best student in the class, hands down, white professor. I told him up front, and he had asked me, well, which schools are you looking to go to? I said, well, I'm not exactly sure right now. There are a lot of schools out there. I just want to solidify that you will write a letter of recommendation. He said, I would be honored to write you a letter of recommendation. But let me tell you, let's not shoot too high. I think you should go to another school. And he had named some tier 3 and tier 4 schools. And I had told him, which school did you go to? And he said, oh, well, I went to the University of Georgia. So he was like, that's top premium school in the South. But don't worry about that. Just get your law degree and go. So I said, okay, I'm going to the University of Georgia Law School. He said, well, I don't think you should even waste your money of even applying there because application fees and everything else. I was like, you know what? I don't want your application, your letter of recommendation anymore. I'll be fine. So when I literally applied to go to the University of Georgia on the very last day to apply for admissions for that year. And within 2 weeks, I got a letter of acceptance back. And once I got that letter of acceptance, I sent it directly to them. And I said, go Dogs. And that's it. So I always share that story, especially young men. I was like, there are going to be plenty of people who say you can't do something or they're going to put you on a path that you trust, because he was one of the best professors I've ever had in political science ever and put me on this path. But don't just trust them. Know what God has for you. And just don't accept anything less.
So thank you for having me once again. My name is Cornelius Porter. I am a Detroit kid through and through. I graduated from Wayne State Law University back in 2016. I decided to move out to LA to go into the film and television industry. Just thinking about racism, like it's something that I probably experienced at every stage in my life, military included. Me and you were both in the military. And before I actually got to your unit, I actually had to deal with 6 months of racism in the military dealing with a first sergeant. But then just once I got to law school, Wayne State, there's issues here and there, but overall it wasn't that big of an issue. It was more of once I got into the workplace. There were times where I would show up to work, and in the beginning, I understand, security was a little skeptical because they didn't know who I was. But after they knew, even though I was working for General Counsel at Crane's Communication, there was some times where security, when I would walk into the building, would still look at me like, "What are you doing here?" Because Crane's Communication, for the most part, I think I may have saw 2 or 3 black faces in that office building when I worked there. So it was always this hovering, like, what are you doing here type of feel working there. Now, my supervisor and the other lawyer that I worked with were both great, but it was just for instance, we had a meeting with the business side, and my boss wanted me to put together this. He pretty much wanted me to run the meeting because there were some changes in federal regulations when it came to advertisements online. And when I walked into the room, the guy from the business office just acted like I wasn't even there. And even though I was talking, he would never address questions to me. He would always address them to my supervisor. And at one point in the meeting, my supervisor was like, look, I don't know anything about this. You have to talk to Cornelius. So it was like this sense of, even though I'm the one that's pretty much controlling the meeting, he would still never address me until my supervisor had to step in and tell him, look, Cornelius is the one that's running the meeting. If you have questions about this, talk to him. I have no idea. He's the one that did all the research and put this together. So it is there. And I think some people are just so blind to it, they don't realize it. So that's my story from the corporate world. Yeah, I'm done.
Hey, and I think it's my turn now, right, NJ?
Yes, it is, sir.
Yeah, so definitely, had similar experiences to those who've already spoken. But I do remember one time in law school. Again, I went to Indiana University, but I was on our moot court team, and sort of as the token Black person, so to speak, that was on our moot court team, or at least that's how a lot of people in the school viewed it. And there was a couple of things that stood out. I did moot court and I did our trial ad team. So one is that in moot court, whenever I would get comments from the professor or even my fellow classmates, the feedback I got was never about the argument that I made, but it was often about how I spoke well or something like that. And and of course I knew what that was about. I'd be like, dude, how was I supposed to speak? No one else got comments like, you speak good, or you can read, right? Which is really odd. But I remember one time we had a competition. We were doing an ABA competition in New York, and basically the teams, we had 3 people on the team, and my other 2 teammates had given their arguments. And when it came to the third day and it was time to give mine, one of my teammates approached me and asked me if I wanted him to do it. And, of course I said no, and I did it, but I just knew where it was coming from, that they thought we had a chance to win. And they thought there was a chance that the Black person on the team was going to throw it down the drain. And, I had to really, overlook that. We definitely talked about it when we got back to the campus and things like that. But that was just one of those things where, I'm not even sure they knew that they were where, that it came from them, and they apologized for it and all those things. But, those things certainly exist. Another thing as far as being an attorney in corporate America, when I first went in-house, I don't have it happen now. I'm at Microsoft, which is a pretty progressive company, but at one of my stops before now, my internal clients, I think, would have a little bit of hesitation when they saw that their counsel was going to be, the Black attorney on the team. And they wouldn't come out and say that, but they would couch it in terms of, well, hey, has Alex been practicing long enough for this? Or they would try to play it on the age thing, but the reality is the only other difference was the color difference. So those things certainly exist. I think I've certainly felt that I've had to sort of prove myself, internally, even with my clients, that hey, I'm not just the Black attorney here, but I'm just a good attorney, and I'm going to represent you well when we're handling these transactions.
You got to unmute yourself, Judge. All right, I'll unmute you.
Okay. All right. So for me, I was in high school, and I was senior year of high school, and my English professor, it was like the week before senior year, week before we were graduating. And she held me after class and she said, I want to prophesy something to you. And she said, one thing I want to say is that, she's like, what do you want to do when you get out of high school? What's your plans? And I said, I want to be a lawyer one day. And she says, you're not going to be a lawyer. She's like, you don't have the grades. You don't have the right demeanor. You're not the best writer. She says, as a matter of fact, I think the best thing for you to do is just find a job, either work in a trade or go to the Army and learn some discipline, which I have nothing. I love, folks who serve our country. But she was saying it in a way, it was as a way of disparaging. Like you go to the Marines or you join the service to learn discipline because really anything else is kind of out of your reach. And she said it in a way of kind of like, I just don't see you doing what you set out to do, what you say you're going to do. And I think that was like, that was one of the, not the first times, but it was something that was so apparent. And it was just so egregious, kind of how she said it and the way she said it and the way she held me after class is almost as a way to like, and then the fact that she said she prophesized it to me, like she was sharing some sort of wisdom to me, saying that, this is something that you can't do. Maybe you should try something else. So I would say that was like the biggest thing for me, biggest example.
Wow. Well, thank you for all of you for sharing. I know three of us on this call, Darrin, Cornelius, and I, we're in the Army, and I don't know about their experiences, but I'll say that, even though there were some people who thought that we should go there because that was the only options we had, it really helped me get through college and pay for college. So I think that, you can turn lemons into lemonade sometimes. And so
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you were able to use that as motivation to do something, basically to continue with your goals.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, it wasn't, she wasn't saying as far as the Army is a way, like you said, like you should, you could use it. Because if I had my choice to do it again, I would have done that. But it was the way she said it was, it wasn't like a positive thing. It was more like, you need to go only for the discipline. You need to go only for, it wasn't like, turn this into an opportunity. You can get school paid for, represent your country. It was all about the fact that you need to learn discipline. And the only way you're going to get it is if you join the Army.
Right. Wow. Okay, so we're going to go ahead to the next question. And in fact, I just want to say, Chris has to leave for another meeting. And so I have two questions that I really want him to answer. So if you all don't mind, I'm going to let him hopefully try to answer these two questions before he has to jump off. So the first question is, why is it important, or what is the importance of representation on the bench and in the courtroom when you think about having more people, more Black males specifically in those spaces? And then the next question is, what does change look like?
Okay, and thank you, brothers, for having me. I'm sorry I've got to go. You haven't noticed, Atlanta has been a epicenter of turmoil for a lot of these issues that have been happening. And that's not to take away from the other things that have been happening across the country with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the countless other African Americans who have lost their lives by state-sanctioned murders, by people who are paid by our tax dollars who are murdering our people. So I'm jumping into a meeting to talk about Rashard Brooks, excuse me. His funeral is going to be on Tuesday, and just planning that stuff out. But to the first question, dealing with representation, we all know representation is key when it comes to the bench, when it comes to lawyers advocating for each other. So it's those communities advocating for your community within itself. Because when it comes down to it, a judge knowing that, hey, I was an African American male and I dealt with some of these issues. Because I know for me personally, there were plenty of times I could have gone to jail, plenty of times. And as me as a lawyer, I can relate to these young African American men who get caught up at certain times. And it's not just to say that African American men are more prone to breaking the law or anything else. It's just to say and recognize that there are other communities that get a pass, or they have other people who have the money, wealth, and resources to take out those type of situations. So representation is key on the bench. Representation is key as advocates. But I'm going to tell you one thing as a lobbyist. There are 3,000 registered lobbyists in the state of Georgia. This goes into inequity. Less than 60 of them are people of color. And I said people of color to make sure that all of us know I'm not just including Black people, all people of color. So when it comes down to those contracts, when it comes down to new judicial posts that come up, when it comes down to getting governmental contracts or even shaping the law today, I found it very insulting that in Georgia on Juneteenth, yesterday, they're trying to pass a hate crimes bill and they put in a protection for police officers who have continuously killed African Americans. And on Juneteenth, you decide that they need to become a protected class who have already been protected in the law more than any other situation. So I would even say, let's make sure we have more judges on the bench that look like us. Make sure we have more lawyers on the bench that look at us. But when it comes to shaping law and making a law, we need more people that look like us. And that's going to be the way that we get through economically and in a legal sense in the criminal justice field. And justice to me, or how does this all shape out to me? I believe in this concept called restorative justice. And within that, shaping the concepts of law enforcement versus public safety. And I'm going to use Rashard Brooks' situation as well. This is the gentleman that was shot and killed by the police at Wendy's. So law enforcement says you are only there to make sure the law is enforced. And that's what police officers typically do. There was a call from Wendy's saying there is an individual who is parked in his car and won't move. Okay. The police were called out. They talked to this man for 20 minutes, made him do the nystagmus test and a walk and turn for a DUI, suspected DUI. And then when they were about to arrest him, they got into a struggle. And then as he is running away, the officer shoots twice and hits him in the buttocks, hits him in the back, and Rashard Brooks is now dead. The police officers have now been indicted on a crime. Those are 3 lives. Really don't have that much sympathy for the police officers, but those are 3 lives that have been affected. Compared to public safety, where you could have had a Wendy's employee call and say, there's somebody outside who has a problem. You need to go help them. Someone from public safety come over and saying, you look like you may be inebriated. How about I take you home? How about I call you a Lyft or an Uber? How about I call somebody to get you? We can give you a fine or whatever. But when it comes down to it, I just want to make sure you get home safely. That means Rashard Brooks can go back to his family and be the breadwinner that he is instead of being taken away from the community that he was serving. That means that those 2 police officers no longer have that guilt of murdering somebody in the streets. So arresting people is not what restorative justice means to me. Restorative justice means to me that this won't happen again. And until we actually get into the police culture of saying, we will not accept this anymore, and you need to care about the community instead of caring about laws, that's when we actually make a definite change. So gentlemen, y'all are my inspiration. Thank you, brothers, for what you're doing. NJ, please get me back. I'm sorry, this is just something else that I have to deal with. If y'all need anything, please let me know. All right?
All right. Thank you.
Thank
you, Chris.
Thank you. Stay black.
Hey,
I say
ain't
that
got
with
no
my
choice.
heart. Stay black. All right,
Ain't
brother.
got no choice about that. Thanks, brother. All right. So thank you very much. So we're gonna go ahead and go to Darrin. We're gonna ask the first question is, why is it important to have representation in the courtroom and on the bench and in different areas of the law?
In my opinion, it's all about fairness. It's not like black folks are looking for a handout, looking for a favor. They just want to be afforded what the law says they're entitled to. They want to be treated as fairly as anyone else. And white folks could do it. And don't get me wrong, I have very good white friends and friends of other races. I know some very good people that are white and other races. So this is not everybody. But you will get some folks that will not apply the law, that will not treat a black defendant as fairly as a white defendant or as some other defendant. So without that representation, without someone who has experienced with some of the same things, that will see that person as an equal, and it really takes someone looking at a criminal defendant as an equal, they will not be treated fairly. And you're more likely, as a black man or a black woman, you're more likely to be treated fairly by a judge that is black like you. And I'm not saying that all African American judges are fair, but you're more likely, if there's someone that has the same background as you, the same race as you, you're more likely to be treated fairly. And you want someone who has maybe some similar background as well, because I mean, let's face it, our culture is a little different than some of the other cultures. So for someone that can't relate to what an African American man or woman goes through, yet they are faced with passing a sentence, and it's not just the judge. I mean, you have to think about this. There's a process that's in place long before a case or a matter ever gets before a judge. Starts with possibly a police officer or even someone making a complaint. Then there's the prosecutors, and it goes to the judges. So there are so many players in this game. And if you don't have anyone that's an advocate for you or just willing to be understanding, you're probably going to get screwed. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that there's fair representation. You can't have all black judges for sure, but it should be representative, right? And then all judges should be trained so that they have the sensitivity to recognize or appreciate that someone might not be like them, but they still deserve a fair shot. You need to hold them accountable. So that's what I think.
So I think it's on me, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I agree with a lot of points that the two other people went before me, Chris and Darrin, have said. It's a whole encompassing idea of fair justice in the legal system, where you also have to look at who sits in the DA office, who determines what charges are actually brought forward with individuals, where sometimes other individuals aren't charged for the same crimes that black people are charged with. So I think we have to start there first. And then after that, yeah, judges are very important, because there's many cases out there where you'll have a white judge on the bench and you can look at their records and see how they overcharge African-American defendants compared to white defendants. So it's a very broad spectrum of places that need to be addressed. And I think representation, like everyone has already stated, is very important in these ideas. But to go back to this old saying, just because they're skin folk, I mean, they're kinfolk. There's some people that are out there that have, how do I say it? I hate using the word, but they've sold out because they've come from rough backgrounds, come from areas where they were impoverished, but they feel like, oh, because I made it out, everyone should be able to do the same exact thing that I've done. And that's not always the case. There's plenty of obstacles that other people may face in their household that they didn't face in their household, that have made different paths. So I think there needs to be a level of understanding on the bench and in the DA's office of, okay, is this person doing this because they're just evil, or is this something that comes out of a necessity that maybe we can address a different way instead of charging them and putting them in prison? Because right now we call it a correction system, but most prisons do nothing to try to correct ingrained behaviors in inmates. So it's just a holding cell. And when they're in there, most of the guys, all they have time to do is idle hands is the devil's playground. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, when we have people on the bench that have similar backgrounds that represent where those communities, I think it's very helpful. But at the same time, I think people need to step up and start actually monitoring what their DAs and their judges are doing, because these positions are voted upon. So if we can sit back and say, okay, I don't like the fact that our DA are charging so many young men that could be addressed a different way. Either you wait until the next election to get them out, or if it's that bad, you go through the process of recalling them and put someone else in that place that can actually be effective in helping the community instead of putting people in jail, because jail does not help a community. It only makes it worse because it takes people away. It destroys the households. It doesn't create any corrective behaviors. So once we can address those issues, and I think that deals a lot with actual voting, because these are positions that you vote for, DAs and judges. We get the people that we want in those positions that can actually be fair and still represent the needs of the community, because prison is not always the answer. And I think in some communities, they do have viable options that need to be looked at more. In other communities, they need to create these viable options to say, okay, yeah, they stole something from a store, but do we want to waste thousands upon thousands of dollars to put this person in jail for a $100 item? No, it makes no sense financially. So it's like we need to create other options for DAs and judges to use that actually address the issues that are coming before the courtrooms. So I don't know, that was a lot of random stuff, but.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It looks like we've lost Alex. I know he was driving, so hopefully he'll come back on. So as we let him try to come back on, we're gonna go to Judge Hamilton. I know that you actually talked about this on the campaign trail, so looking forward to hearing what you have to say. If you unmute yourself.
All right. So I'd like to echo a lot of what Brother Cornelius said. He made two great points. And the first one is we've got to have a starting point. And like what he was saying is that, first we got to, it's not just about the judge, because there's different components in the courtroom. You got the judge, you got the prosecutor, you have the defense attorney. So really we need to start with, how do we get more minorities? How do we expand the pipeline to get minorities into the criminal justice field, right? So it starts with, how do we get more minorities in the law school? Because in order to be an attorney, in order to be a judge, you got to be an attorney. In order to become an attorney, you got to go through law school. And unfortunately, most of the minorities aren't going to law school as much as, other demographics. So we've got to figure out a way to increase that or create a pipeline from undergrad to law school. And I think that's how we start. That's how we get more Black prosecutors. That's how we get more Black judges, how we get more Black attorneys in general. And then furthermore, with the electorate, we have the power to elect people, and we have the power to elect other folks who we think are going to do a better job and represent in a better fashion. So we've got to, those two things are very key. And I tell people that all the time. As far as with diversity, I think it's more like Brother Toney was saying, it's more than just diversity in the fact of skin color or race. It's also diversity in thought, right? So it's important to have a judge on the bench that is from or has the same kind of, maybe had the same sort of struggles that most of the people that come in front of him or her on the bench have. So for me, I'll use me as an example. I come from inner city in Akron, come from a poor neighborhood. And so I have different experiences. I've been pulled over, racially profiled as a teenager, as an adult, been racially profiled. And so I know that these things happen. So when I'm on the bench, I understand and I can pull from not just, the legal side of it and the things that I can do as a judge from my legal studies and from being a prosecutor and being a defense attorney, but also from the fact of just from a human standpoint of just being in those situations and not being in the wrong, just driving while Black and being pulled over for no apparent reason. So I think that the diversity in thought, I think that that's very, very important, because it's not just skin color. It's also about what we do, what we think, our experiences. How can we use those experiences to help us, to help me on the bench, to make the fair and right decisions for everybody. So I just think it's important to have diversity in thought and diversity on the bench in general. And so I think that, because of those things, it makes you a well-rounded individual and an even better judge or even better elected official. Because again, we have the power to elect people that we want, and the power really is in the people. It's not really in the people that you elect, it's in the people that elect you.
Wow, that's not only powerful, but it's true. And I think sometimes people get elected and forget that. And we actually, Judge Hamilton and I got elected on the same night, and I just know in just talking with different elected officials and especially about racism specifically, there are some people who feel like or seem like they lost the understanding of what it means to be elected by people and the people having the power and listening more than being the ones to tell people how it's supposed to be, right? So I think that's very important. So these next two questions, I know Judge Hamilton will not be able to answer these because of the judicial canon or code of ethics, as he shared with me. And I got it right. Thank you, Cornelius. Didn't give me any credit. No credit.
You did good. You did good.
All right. So I just need my credit. Yeah. He will tell me when I'm wrong or I forget.
He got it right. Cornelius, you're good.
So he can't answer these questions through the code of ethics as a judge. So that's why we are not going to ask him these two questions. But one of the things that I study in race and culture is actually a part of my expertise. I'm an educational sociologist, and race is like my canon, if you will. And so everything within race is what I study, specifically looking at the ways in which race interplays and interacts with education and the culture and society all together. And so there's this theory called critical race theory, which comes out of the legal studies. It comes out of the legal field. And Derek Bell was the lawyer who came up with it. His number one piece of critical race theory is that there's a permanence in race. So race is permanent. Can you talk to me, Darrin and Cornelius, just a little bit about your thoughts around race's permanence, specifically in the legal field or legal system?
I think this will be a comment on just race and racism in general. I think it'll apply to the legal field, but I think it'll apply to life. I grew up in a small town in Mississippi, and I'm saying that to say that I experienced an incredible amount of racism being in a small town in Mississippi. I mean, some things that was just blatantly in my face, not even, people were not even trying to hide certain things. And I, as a child, um, thought or wished or hoped that one day there would be a cure for racism. We get to a place where there was no more racism. I'm a little older now. I'm quite older now. And quite a few years ago, I gave up on that hope or aspiration that there would be no more racism, because I've come to the realization that that's impossible. At least I think it is. I think there will always be racism. There will always be folks that are just filled with hate or ignorance or however you want to look at it. And so my hope became let's make hate, let's make racism and all of these other things the unpopular position. And what I mean by that is if enough good people stand up against racism, against sexism, against all of these things that shouldn't be, then those folks that espouse those feelings will then they will hold the unpopular position, and quite frankly, will be uncomfortable as hell, and maybe that will make them shut up or go on about their business. But enough good people have got to stand up. Just like what's happening with Floyd and all these other folks, the reaction. Good people are finally saying, I can't believe this, and they're standing up, right? But before, people were sort of quiet, even though we've been screaming for years about our injustice. And people are sort of acting like this is brand new. This is quite old, but thank God for video, right? And now people are seeing some of the things that we've been complaining about for years. And they're saying, oh, I didn't know it was like that. So I think I do believe that racism will be around. It's not going to go anywhere. And you have to think about the society we live in. I think racism, it's bad for sure. It's an awful condition. But I think that racism is a symptom of what some of the ideals, let's say, that we have in this country. For instance, the Army, and you have some military experience, I have some military experience. Well, all of us do, right? Except for the judge. Be all you can be, right? Or in other words, be better than everybody else. So many things in society teaches us to be better than everybody else. Just about everything we do. You go to school, make better grades than anybody else. You get in your job, be better than anybody else. And I'm not saying these are bad things, but what it does is it ingrains in us, we've got to find ways that we are different than the other person. Or if you want to take it a little deeper, find ways in which we are better than another person. So it's like, you want to talk about racism, we've got to talk about this culture that we live in and what fuels it, right? Because we can't cure or address racism if we don't address the underlying thing. So it's far deeper than just the concept of racism. And if we don't get that, we might as well just stop even trying to correct anything, because it's going to keep being fueled. Because guess what? If there were no black people, if we were all the same color, we still have some of the same issues. Because guess what? It would be socioeconomic. If it wasn't socioeconomic, it would be class. If it wasn't class, it would be background. Because it's ingrained in us to find something, right? Race is easy. White, black, that's easy. That's why racism is so prolific, because it stands out, right? But if there weren't racial differences, there'd be others, and it would be just as bad. We've got to really get to the root, and the root goes far beyond just race.
So yeah, I really agree with everything that Darrin mentioned. I think I'm also of the idea that I don't think racism will ever go anywhere. I think it's just too ingrained into human nature as a whole. When you go back and look through history, countries all over the world have developed some form of racism where one group feels like they're better than the other one solely because they're part of that group. So I don't think that that's going to go anywhere anytime soon because it's been a part of human nature for way too long. I am happy that during these protests, I've seen a lot of people of different backgrounds coming together to stand up and say, okay, enough is enough. Yes, we're different. We know this, but that doesn't mean we're better. No one should be treated differently because of their skin. And I tell people, like, there's some people that consider themselves, quote unquote, allies that say, oh, I don't see color, which I think is a very damaging statement to say to anyone. Yes, you see color. It's a part of nature. Everyone is different. But that doesn't mean that you have to downplay them being of a certain color because you want to seem like you're against racism. I'm trying to remember the whole question because I know we're talking more about race instead of race and the legal system. But yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. He hit a lot of key points that I was thinking about when you first posed the question. Are you still there? Can you repeat the question so I can kind of?
Yes, I am still here. So it's basically, Derek Bell talked about racism and race being a permanent fixture in American society. So I just thought racism was permanent.
So I do think it's a permanent fixture in society, but I think it's something that can be dwindled down to a point to where it doesn't have the impact that it has now on our society. Because it definitely shows in the legal system. It shows how laws are created, it shows how laws are implemented, and it shows how laws are enforced. Like, those are all a part of this whole racist undertone in America, where they'll try to say, oh, this law is not racist, but the way that you're implementing the law and enforcing the law is racist. But that goes back to the first question where we talk about diversity and like the judge said, diversity in thought, to where we get people in certain positions that say, okay, this is the law, but we need to enforce it fairly across all groups. Until that happens, it's going to be almost impossible to do. And right now, you still have a lot of older male judges, white, that have these implicit biases ingrained into their beings. So when they're on that bench interpreting these laws and enforcing these laws onto defendants, it's based off of their implicit biases that they have in their heart. That I think Harvard has a study where they talk about implicit biasing in policing and in legislation. And implicit biases are something that everyone has. I don't care what anyone says, everyone has them, because you're taught certain things from the moment you come out the womb about race and society. Like, you're taught growing, like, I especially know when I was growing up, when you watch TV, the bad guy breaking in the house was always the black guy. So you're taught as a kid, oh, if you see a lineup of people, oh, the bad guy is the black guy. So these are things that are ingrained in society from the moment they come out of the womb, which have to be addressed at some point. And it takes parents stepping up and having conversations with their children, because a lot of parents don't have conversations with their children. And then when stuff comes out on social media, they're shocked and like, oh my God, I never taught my kid that. No, you never taught your kid anything about race because you let them develop opinions based off of negative stereotypes that are all around us in society. It's the smallest things, from advertisements to where if you see something that's supposed to be geared toward families, you have the white family that has the mother, the father, and the kid. But then if you see something that's geared toward black families, it's usually just the mother and the kid. So these are things that are just ingrained in society that become reflections of how laws are passed and how they're interpreted.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I did put in the comments there the implicit bias test that is done by Harvard, that project. We use it all the time in the work that I do to begin conversations and begin conversations about biases that we hold that are most likely unconscious, that is deep embedded in our consciousness, and we do it and we act on it, whether we believe we are doing it or not, or whether it's intentional or not. And it is. And a lot of it has to do with what's ingrained in us within the messages that are sent to us in schools, that messages that are sent to us through commercials and advertisement and TV shows and cartoons. All those things have a role in how our implicit biases are shaped, along with, how we were raised and things we hear and are exposed to in the community. So the next question that I would like the two of you to answer is just, and when you think about the legal system, how has the legal system been used in order to address racism in the past? If you can give us a 90 seconds to 2 minutes response there.
There have been a number of laws passed to so-called address racism. You've got the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and then the Civil Rights Act of 1968, when housing was added to the law. You've got affirmative action, and the list goes on and on. And and I won't go through what these laws entail, but they were aimed at addressing and are aimed at addressing racism, discrimination, that kind of thing. Now, you have to think about this stuff. These were, at the time, ground sweeping laws. I mean, they were major, right? And I think the intent with every one of those laws was good, right? But you can't legislate someone not being a racist. And in every instance, and if you guys correct me if you think I'm wrong, in every instance, that's what the legislature, the government has tried to do. I'm going to make you not be a racist. I'm going to make you, with these laws, not do racist things. You can't do that, right? You think about it. You've got, before the Civil Rights Act, I mean, it was pretty much okay. It wasn't okay. It was pretty much okay to do racist things. It was. You've got this groundbreaking legislation that says to a society that has been doing these things for hundreds of years, you can't do this, right? How well do you think that kind of legislation, that law, is going to be received? The same for affirmative action, right? How well do you think? It's like driving your car down the highway 80 miles an hour, and all of a sudden there's a brick wall that you didn't see when you hit it. There's no preparation, there's no anything, right? You think about this. Really, to address racism, you have to address someone's mind and their heart, right? That's really how you address racism. And I can't think of a point in history with all this groundbreaking legislation, there was ever an effort to say, this is what we need to do. These are the laws that we're thinking about passing. And these are the things that we need for you to do so you can embrace this legislation, right? That's never been done. It's just, here it is, do it or suffer the consequences. Change absolutely nowhere. No education, no self-awareness, no anything. And so they all, because of that, fail miserably. Because no hearts were changed, no minds were changed. People are still thinking the same way. It's just now they have to operate in the parameter of these laws, right? So then you get a lot of times people trying to get around the law. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay, so I agree with what Darrin was talking about. However, I remember when I was undergrad, one of my philosophy courses dealing with politics and law. I can't remember who, like which study it came out of, but there's an old political science theory that laws can have an impact on moral attitudes in the society. I believe that is true to a certain extent, but I don't think that it is a catch-all, because you're still going to have a lot of people that fight against those changes. But then over time, I think it does have an impact on people's moral attitudes, because you can hear it when you see the videos when someone says, oh, you can't do that, that's illegal. So I do believe that it does have some impact on the moral attitude of a society. I can't say how much of an impact it has, because there's still a lot of people that that have these negative racist thoughts and ideas in their head to make it say like, okay, this law didn't do anything. But I believe that it can have somewhat of an impact. But it just goes back to education, like he stated, because a lot of that attitude, I believe personally, comes from the whitewash history that is taught in education across the country, where people are told, oh, these are the people that you come from. Look at how great they are. So I believe that plays a huge part of it as well. But I think laws can have an impact on society's moral attitude, but I don't think that we should stop there at just law. It also needs to go back to the educational system as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I know I agree with you about both laws can have an impact on the way we act and behave, but the education system as well. And I know that here in Akron, we're trying to move the needle by actually addressing it and calling racism a thing and saying that we acknowledge that it exists. I think that's the first step before you can solve any problem, is to acknowledge that you have a problem and that there is one. Whether you created it or not, it doesn't matter. If you created it, there is a problem and we're going to address it instead of tiptoeing around it. So I think that's very important. And so thank you for your responses. Now, if you can talk about programs or initiatives that you think would help with the criminal justice reform. And if there's any questions, any other questions from those watching, we're getting to them next. So make sure you put them in the box as we're looking to wrap up soon. So Darrin, if you can take that one away.
I think people oftentimes want to point to when there are issues, like police brutality has been in the forefront as of late, and so folks are saying the laws are not sufficient, so we have to change the laws. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but anyone who knows anything about the law, you know that the law cannot address every situation specifically. There's always some vagueness in terms of the law. So to me, and don't get me wrong, if a law needs to be changed, it needs to be changed. But you can always go to that and say the law is to me, that's a cop-out. Because the laws can address pretty much any wrong there is if you're willing to apply the law equally and like it's meant to be applied, right? And you know, it's just, but and I say it's a cop-out because a lot of times it's used, instead of doing what you're supposed to do, let's point to a law and an efficiency in the law. That's the easy way out, right? Like, for instance, Floyd. Why do we need a change in law for Floyd? That man was murdered. There are laws in the book regarding murder, right? A lot of police brutality. There are laws in the book to address that if it's applied, right? So I think certainly, you know, reform is needed. Possible, like I know, like in some places, there's some police officers have qualified immunity. Certainly that needs to be looked at. But you can always, and I think I've said this, you can always point to deficiencies in terms of programs, in terms of laws, that kind of thing. So I think a focus needs to be first, what are the existing programs? What are the existing laws? And do they cover it? Right? And then if you answer that question, then you go to developing new programs, developing laws. I don't know. I'm not an expert in terms of, let's look at police. I'm not an expert in terms of the programs that police go through for their training. But I mean, I wouldn't want to be a police officer. They go through a lot. So their mental capacity needs to be tested. I don't know if they get ongoing counseling, but that's a stressful job, and they need to, their mind has to be right. So, we need to make sure that their mental capacity is right, and that, there needs to be programs for that. So, and I know I'm about out of time, so I'll just stop there. But.
So I guess I'll kind of pick up to the aspect of policing and reform. Me and you had a conversation about this when you first asked me to be on the show, and I'll stand by that to this day. I think right now in some cities, it takes a drastic measure at this point. We've been calling for police reform for over 50 years. We need police reform. We need police reform. At some point, you have to start from scratch. I am a big advocate of dissolving a lot of these police departments and starting from scratch. Minneapolis has just, after we talked, voted, the city council has voted to dissolve their police department. Now, their plan is a little different from what we talked about. They're going to go to more of a community policing type of thing. I haven't read too much more on how they plan to execute that and what that actually means in the long run. But I believe that there are some departments that no longer should have any more leeway in saying, okay, we're going to try to do this reform, because you've had over 50 years to try to implement some type of impactful reform and you still have failed. So I believe for many cities, that is the next best step. And after that, we need to start addressing who actually becomes a police officer. There's numerous studies. The most recent one comes out of Michigan State. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the people that wrote the study, but it talks about the impact of policing when your police officers are educated. It pretty much piggybacks off of another previous study that was done years ago, but it didn't have enough information, so a lot of people kind of discredit it. But this one is much more informative, much more broad, and it shows how having an educated police force does have a positive impact on the police department and how they police. I believe that's one of the first steps. Second step is the actual training process. For the amount of power and authority that police officers are given when they become police officers, I can't think of one city who I think sends officers through adequate training. I think most cities are at 21 weeks, which is absolutely ridiculous for a person that you're going to give this amount of power and authority to. I can sit and look at numerous videos of police interacting with civilians, and for the most part, you can sit and tell that the officers have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to laws and enforcing the laws. I know it's a rough job. I have family that are police officers. I'm the son of a police officer. So I know that it is a rough job. I remember many a night sitting up hearing about a shooting or a police officer getting shot and wondering if it was my father. I understand the job is hard. However, if we're going to put men and women on the streets that have this much power, we need to make sure that they are highly trained and highly educated and have the mental capacity to do this job fairly. So right now, no department provides that for officers that are coming into the force. They're undereducated, they're undertrained, and they're put in stressful positions that they, quite frankly, aren't ready to handle. So there needs to be a lot of implementations that involve police departments, everything from annual counseling sessions, mental checkups on officers, training programs. Like as lawyers, when you're practicing, you have to keep doing certain things in order to keep your license. This is not required for police officers. Policing changes. Like the theories of policing change all the time for the better, and most officers have no idea about it. Laws change. Most officers can't tell you the changes that the Supreme Court has said on how they have to conduct business. Like most officers can't tell you that they can't hold you, if they initially stop you for running a red light, they can't hold you up for a prolonged period of time just to get a canine dog there. Most officers feel like they have the power to do it because they don't know the Supreme Court has made a ruling on it. So these officers need additional training while they're on the force. That's all for me.
You gotta unmute yourself, Judge.
It's not letting me do it. I'm sorry, it won't let me do it. Okay, I'll just be brief. I'll speak from the standpoint of my position as a judge. I think there are programs like the brother talked about involving restorative justice, and as a municipal court judge, we have I think we have more discretion in our sentencing, because most of the people that come through our court are not what people mostly consider career criminals, right? They may have had a disorderly conduct, or they may have had a night and they got a OVI, or they got behind the wheel and drank too much, or they've done something, but they haven't done something that will materially alter their lives to the point of, so let's say if someone who picked up a felony, and that's a, murder, you're charged with murder or rape or one of those other crimes. Those things, you're looking at prison time if you're convicted. But in municipal court, it's different because a lot of the crimes that we're dealing with are low level. And so it's very important for me to become an active municipal court judge. And that was the main reason why I ran for the seat, is because I think that I have more discretion in my sentencing, because you can actually take part in programs. So I want to start a program for young Black males, ages from 18 to 26, and basically get them in programming through the probation department, get them in different types of programming that will help them succeed in life. Because I want to stop, and that's the good thing about being an active municipal court judge, is that you can stop people from going any further into the criminal justice system. Because in the active municipal court or a municipal court judge, that is most folks, again, they're not career criminals, but that is their first introduction to the criminal justice system. And so if you can do programming, because like Cornelius said, jail is not the end all be all. It's not, it doesn't have to be the first resort. It could be the last resort, right? So if there's other things that you can do as far as programming that can delay that and help people and turn their lives around, I think that for me, I think that's the best way to do it.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for those answers. So the last question, if you can keep your responses to close to a minute as possible. And so I put this in the message box so you can ruminate on what your response would be. But when you think about change, what does change look like?
I think, and I'll just say it, I think now with things changing. I've never seen a time in my life where folks are actually talking about issues surrounding race like they are now. I haven't seen people protest in the manner in which they're doing, like they're doing right now. I think it takes conversation, but then after that, it takes action. And I think people are actually demanding that things happen now. We haven't seen it. I don't think we've seen that before. And it's not just black folks. I think people are appalled. I think people are sick of it. And I think that people are finally realizing that they have to stand up and demand change. So I think we're seeing it right now. I hope I'm right. And only time will tell. Thank you.
So I think I see change right now as this huge highway with multiple lanes. Everyone doesn't have to be doing the exact same thing as long as everyone is moving in the same direction of the end result of having some sort of change. We can have people that are focused on one thing while other people are focused on something else. Other people are focused on this, because it's going to take a team effort. Like in the game of football, everyone can't throw the football. Everyone can't catch the football. Everyone needs to be a part of the actual whole movement of getting to the end zone. And that's fair treatment for everyone in the US, no matter what race, sex, gender, anything that you go by.
Okay, I guess that's the bad thing about going last. You got to go behind some great answers. I mean, you brothers have been giving some great responses. But for me, I would say, just from my standpoint, I'll just give a story, and it'll be brief. So my second week on the bench, I was in arraignment court. And it's, you guys know, it's when everybody comes in and they come in front of you and they can have the opportunity to hire an attorney, or the court will appoint one for them. So my second week on the bench, I was in arraignment court, and they bring the defendants over from the jail, and they're all in jumpsuits, and they're all shackled up, and they're in the jury box waiting on their arraignment time. So there was a young African-American brother that came up. He walked up to the bench. He was first up, and I asked him, told him his crime, and I asked him, how do you plead? And he says, I plead guilty. So when they plead guilty, that means I sentence them right away. Then so he pled guilty. Then the other guy, he comes out, ask him how he pleads. He pled guilty. Then the third guy comes out, and these are all black men. He comes out, he pleads guilty. So now the prosecutor's looking at me. The whole room is quiet because they normally don't see this. You typically don't see 3 or 4 people who plead guilty right away. So then the fourth guy comes out, and he pleads guilty. So then I asked him, I said, what is going on today? Why is everybody pleading guilty? And he said, well, we were just talking in the gallery, and we saw you. And so we didn't want to get an attorney. We believed that you would be fair to us. And so we didn't need to get an attorney. We didn't need to do any of that stuff, because we know whatever sentence you give us, it's going to be fair. And he said that because I looked like him, like Brother Toney said. Sometimes, or a lot of times, people feel like they get justice if they see someone on the bench, or they see someone in a position of authority that looks like them, so they feel they have the opportunity to be treated fair. And that's what change really is. People feeling like they're going to get the opportunity to get a fair shake in the criminal justice system. And that is one of the main reasons why I ran, is because that's one of the ways that we can affect change, is giving people the perception and like we said, the diversity in thought, and just the fact that when they see someone that they feel like they can relate to, that's relatable to them, hear their story and see them for who they are, they will believe that whatever sentence you give them, it's going to be fair. And that's the way we can affect change, making sure that people feel like they have the opportunity to be treated fair. And that's really what justice is. And then once people start feeling like they have the opportunity to be fair, that their voices will be heard, then you will start to see a change in their attitude.
Wow, thank you very much. So we have 2 audience questions. I'm going to ask one though, and the other question, if you all can go into the chat and respond to it, that'd be great, so that we can end. So someone talked about, I think it was Cornelius, who had talked about there being multiple lanes in which we all should be traveling in or operating in, going down the same road. And so there's a question asking, but who governs those lanes? How do you become inclusive and engaging people of all walks of life if everyone's in different lanes?
Right.
I think that's a good question. I don't think one person should govern that type of movement. I think it should be a collective action among people in society. For instance, we vote on politicians to take the lead. So some politicians, they focus on certain things, others focus on other things. We have nonprofit organizations that champion certain issues. We can support all of these nonprofit organizations that champion positive issues in society. I think that a lot of times when we just depend on one person and one person only, if they fail us, it becomes too hurtful and people decide to give up on it. So I think that when it's a collective action where people are all a part of it, I think it provides a long-term solution to a lot of these things. I think we have to, as a society, have to get away from this idea that one person is the only person that we look to for certain things. Because, like, for instance, Judge David, he's a judge. There's multiple people that sit on the bench with him. So we're not going to just depend on David to be the person that makes a change in the courtroom. We have to, as a society, say, okay, we've put all these people in the courtroom to make this change. We as a society have to say, okay, are you doing your job? No? Okay, fine. Let's find someone else to do it. That's one lane. That's the courtroom. In the DA's offices, DAs across the country, are you doing your job? No. Okay. We get other people in there. So I think the people are the people that are behind who drives these lanes. And we don't want to just depend on one person to be in charge. The people have to be a part of this movement.
Right. Wow. Thank you very much. So the other question, I think it could be really quick, and maybe all of you might have an answer to this really quickly. But there's another person looking for resources. Cornelius, again, he mentioned about the police dog, and that if they stopped you for one thing, they can't, wait, hold you there as, you wait for a police dog. A young Black man asked, are there any resources to find out what your rights are in that way, so and you can challenge when these things happen? Anybody have any resources?
I'm a little older than the other folks in the room, and I say that to say that when I was growing up, didn't really have the internet so much. Now, everything you want to know, you can get on the internet, put in a question, you're going to get more than you ever want in terms of resources. Everything. I mean, I tried to test the internet to see if there was something that it didn't know, or there was no information regarding anything I wanted to find out. Anything you want to know is out there. All you have to do is search for it. Then you've got to be able to, cipher through it. But it's all out there, more than you ever want. Everything is out there.
Anyone else?
So let me piggyback off that. First, for whoever asked that question, that decision comes from Rodriguez versus United States. It was the decision came out in 2015 by the Supreme Court. However, there are a number of organizations across the U.S. that provide people with the basic information of their rights when it comes to police interaction. I know the ACLU does it, the NLG does it. There's a number of organizations that literally have lawyers that, based on that state's jurisdiction, because some of these things are slightly different depending on the state that you're in, that actually have pamphlets that explain to people what their rights are when it comes to police interactions. Like, for instance, keeping it short, some states, you have to identify yourself when the police come up to you. Other states, they follow a Supreme Court ruling that says, okay, you have to have reasonable suspicion of a crime in order to make a person identify themselves when they approach you. So just look for different organizations like ACLU, NLG, that are in your areas that provide actual pamphlets written by attorneys that explain your rights when you deal with police interactions.
Thank you. Judge, you have anything before we close out?
No, what they said was good enough.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I wish Chris was here because he actually works for ACLU, so he could have actually provided some more information. I'm actually going to ask him to put some stuff in the chat. So for anybody who wants that information later, hopefully Chris will put some information in there for you because he does that type of work every day. And so with that being said, I want to thank you, Judge Hamilton. I want to thank you, Cornelius. I want to thank you, Darrin. Three of my brothers for coming here, providing your perspectives on the legal aspects of progress, as well as just your perspectives as individuals in the legal field. And so I want to thank you for taking this time out tonight to be with us. You don't know how much this means to me. I have absolutely no experience in the legal field, and I was a little nervous about coming up with questions and thinking through things about the legal field, which I must admit I probably need that pamphlet too because I have absolutely no idea. I appreciate that, Cornelius, my brother. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up and thank everyone for joining us today. Again, this is Perspectives with Black Men. Our voices, our experiences, our solutions. And so with that being said, we have part 8. And part 8 is with you is education. So educating our Black men. And so we have 5 outstanding Black male educators joining us on Wednesday at 8:30, same back time, different same back channel on Wednesday to talk about how, the things about educating our Black men. I'm really excited to have Dr. Sean Robinson from Wisconsin join us. He and I bonded because we both were in special ed, and he's actually does research in special ed. And we know a lot of our Black boys are in special ed and being put there wrongfully every day almost. And so I'm excited to have him. I'm also excited to have a principal out of Mississippi, Charles Stevenson will be with us on Wednesday, as well as out of Minnesota, right outside of St. Paul. We will have another principal, Cunell Cooper, with us on Wednesday. We also have the head of the African American Studies program at Western Carolina University, or West Carolina. I think I got that right the first time. Dr. Kalanji Walton will be with us. And last but not least, we have another principal joining us, Jamar Humphreys out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. So we're really excited to have these brothers come join us and talk about what it's like to be responsible for educating our Black men, and what are some of the things that they go through as Black men in education. And so with that being said, thank you, Judge. Thank you, Cornelius. Thank you, Darrin, for joining us. Thank you out there for all the people who have been watching. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and happy Father's Day out there to all the fathers. This is Perspectives with Black Men. Tomorrow is Father's Day. We usually do this show on Sundays, but I really wanted to respect Father's Day. And then I know my family, we're doing a family Zoom with our father tomorrow. And so I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who's taking the time out. And if you are a father, thank you for what you've done. You are truly examples for all of us, and help make our community great. So thank you. Y'all have a great weekend. And thank you again for joining us to our panelists.